Quake. Quake? Quake. 25 years young, no less. And what a fine time to release a remaster, debuting at this year's QuakeCon. The Quake remaster boasts up to 4K resolution support, including widescreen, enhanced models, dynamic colored lighting, anti-aliasing, depth of field, and the reinstatement of the original soundtrack by none other than Trent Reznor. This, in my opinion, is one of the better ways to do a remaster of a classic video game property. Crucially, you don't want to fuck with the formula. The game is already tippity-top. You want to keep that as is. Everything else, it's bells and whistles, but bells and whistles that don't ultimately distract, merely enhance. Something else I quite enjoy about this release is it's not taking away what everyone already has. This isn't an outright replacement for the original version of Quake that was available on Steam. Everyone still has access to that, so if you want to go back, if you want to augment it with your preferred source port of choice and dick about with your preferred selection of mods, then you can indeed do that. But as for mod support in this newer version, it seems to be a little up in the air at the moment. More established mods, such as Arcane Dimensions, I believe, aren't fully compatible with it, but I imagine that's not something that's going to be an issue for long, because if they want to keep Quake relevant, they're going to have to get that mod support trucking along just fine. But aside from all of this, I am here to talk about my experience playing a new expansion pack that has been added to Quake, courtesy of Machine Games. Those are the guys behind Wolfenstein: A New Order, and it's called Dimension of the Machine. Subtle, I know. First things first, you certainly get the sense that Machine Games are certainly leveraging those aforementioned bells and whistles, because damn, this hub map is looking pretty damn spiffy indeed. As for its layout, this is broken up into 5 realms, each of which encompassing 2 levels, so you're getting about 10 mainline levels. There's a secret one buried in there somewhere, and of course you've got your climactic end level, which is unlocked after collecting runes from those aforementioned realms and bringing them back to the hub map. As for which realm you should start with, I'd say it's entirely up to you. They're all relatively fair game as far as difficulty curve goes, though that said, I would probably advise against starting with something like Realm of the Stonemasons. As for why, don't you worry, we'll get there soon enough. As for my particular experience, my first pick was Realm of the Machinists. All things considered, a very mid-grade pair of levels, not to diminish the way it looks or the way it plays, it's just, it's okay. It looks okay, it plays okay, it's very okay. I did kind of appreciate how its first part switches between theming. You've got kind of the above-ground industrial, which then transitions to the more subterranean dungeon-led sections, and with that it also has the prescience to switch up the enemy types to suit the environment too, which I do quite appreciate. I also quite enjoyed this sequence of shoot switches down here that act as chain anchors that, when destroyed, lower this cage, allowing you to progress with the key. Fine introduction, plenty of corridor blasting to be done, and then there's part 2. Part 2 feels like it's got more of the same going on, really. It's got a demarcation between its more industrial bunker sections and its lower dungeon reaches, and it just crams more enemies into it, really. It's a fun sequence of battles, culminating in this big old warehouse-looking room that just keeps throwing enemies at you for an extended period of time. I will say I did enjoy the way it handled the descent into the lower reaches. Rather than repeating the elevator section of the first part, it has you jumping down these platforms. Once you've dispatched everything at the bottom, you got a little bit of a dilemma in terms of how you're getting all the way back up again. I also quite enjoyed the ending section, which forms a kind of pick-your-own-poison scenario. Ultimately, you don't have to flick every switch down here, it's just that depending on which one you go for will determine on how soon you're going to have to deal with a big old fuzzy shambler. And yes, they're fuzzy. You can't convince me otherwise. Look it. They're so goddamn fluffy, how else do you think they're gonna throw electricity at you? Static charge, bitches! But I digress. Dealing with that grants you access to the rune for that realm. Snagging that in turn will grant you access to the exit, which is guarded, of course, by 2 Vors on an elevator. Fuck those things in particular. But that, as they say, is that, and with Rune in hand, we are done with Realm of the Machinists. Oh man, Realm of the Blacksmiths. I absolutely adore the design of this initial part. Exiting this church will present you with your main objective for the map, entering this big-ass fortress, and in order to do so, you're gonna have to track down a pair of keys, and that requires you traversing the crumbling, decayed ruins adjacent, and the way this all fits together is just, oh, chef's kiss. It's wonderful. It's just really nice to see a theme not just used as set dressing, as a coat of paint to define one level from the next, but used in a way that feels integral, that feels structural. It's also worth mentioning how the encounters here differ from that initial realm I played. Realm of the Machinists was content to pack quite chunky crowds of enemies into its encounters, whereas here the confrontations feel altogether more deliberate, making the most of the environments within which they take place. It also does something with regards to its level design that absolutely tickles my pickle, which is leading you on a merry journey only to deliver you back somewhere familiar. And this is all in service of acquiring the gold key, and honestly, this kind of structure just gives me the warm and fuzzies. Can't quite explain it, I just think it's neat. The silver key route sees you descending into an altogether more dingy, grimy, subterranean section of this map, one that will see you contending with a fair degree of zombies, death knights, and ogres. So yeah, you're definitely gonna get a good old workout with the nail gun and the grenade launcher here. I love how much of a contrast this genuinely feels to the more sun-kissed above-ground sections of this map, and ultimately culminates in one of my favorite pieces of design, which is a set of crumbling buildings, each kind of tipping into one another, that you then ascend in order to return back to the surface. It's just something that looks like it was an absolute pain in the ass to design, and mercifully the sum result of that is something that is just cool as all heck. Winding your way around to the silver key gets you a shambler surprise, and while you're at it, you might as well watch out for the spawn. Bringing the key home will see you facing off against what feels like the now customary end of level Vors, and all that's left after that is to descend into the bowels of the fortress itself, and that is part 1 complete. I feel kind of bad for the second part of this realm because that opening section is a real tough act to follow. But hey, at least we get to find out what's inside that big, intimidating fortress. All things considered, this is a ridiculously densely packed map. It really ramps up the intensity in comparison to the first part, and once again does a lot of really neat design in terms of its structure that'll see you frequently looping back to places previously visited in order to once again move forward. Thankfully, those claustrophobic labyrinthine interiors do eventually make way with some more easily readable geography. This section here proving a favorite, giving you a nice lovely clear line of sight to your ultimate objective. The latter sections of this map are, quite frankly, ridiculous. Sometimes I have to remind myself this is all still the same map as you plunge ever deeper into the bowels of the fortress, eventually accessing the lava pit at the bottom where you'll be able to snag a precariously placed gold key, which then causes an earthquake. And I freely admit, I fully expected to see Chthon rising from the pit, but no, I was distracted long enough for my shins to start melting instead. Battling past some scrags and Vors will greet you with another neat little set-piece moment as the walkways you accessed earlier begin to crumble into the lava below, prompting some fleet-footed thinking that'll land you safely on some adjoining pipes. This map, quite frankly, gets absolutely dizzying in terms of action towards the end, and believe me, I've skipped over a fair bit of it already, but once you go through this gold door, boy does it lay it on thick. Firstly, you'll be battling your way up to the rooftops, which requires nothing short of a massacre to get through, whereupon you will disable a few electrodes, kill a shambler, and then finally get your hands on the rune. Or so you thought. Instead, the whole platform descends into a previously visited area, which once again just rams home the ridiculous degree of interconnectedness that's going into the level design here, and it's about this point that the map decides, you know what, there's nowhere near enough suffering going on here, so I think payment for picking up the rune has to be, well, what else? Not 1, not 2, but 3 goddamn shamblers.
Of course!
And guess what? We're not done. We're not done, because we've still got to get to the exit. And guess what's behind this door? That's right, another shambler. God, I'm just so happy about this turn of events. But let's be real here. What festival of pain would be complete without a room full of Vors, spawns, death knights, and fiends? Sure, you get a quad damage just to, help deal with the carnage, but trust me, the first few attempts at this did not go particularly well. But yeah, that's Realm of the Blacksmiths for you. Absolutely brilliant level design and theming, complemented with, by the end, absolutely ball-breaking encounters. It hurts, but in a good way. Realm of the Stonemasons starts you off in a toxic swamp, so if that right there isn't a statement of intent, then I don't know what is. I'll be honest, I kind of forgot most of what happens during the course of the first part of this realm, and that's because the second part is where the real spicy shit kicks in. But in the interest of giving the first part of this a fair recap, I will at least start off by saying this map is what happens when you have a grey and brown competition, and thoroughly knock it out the park in the brown category, because good grief, this map is so brown. Now for all you concrete grey enthusiasts out there, don't worry, I got you. We got plenty of grey in here as we get deeper into the reaches of this map. And just in case you were getting a little bored with all of the grunts, hey, have a pair of shamblers. You know, as a treat. I can't help but feel that maybe the theming for this particular realm is what's actively working against it, because the last realm had the theme of the blacksmiths, and you can get away with foundries, factories, all sorts of industrial weirdness, but here it's stonemasons, and I'm not sure you can really get quite as wild with that concept, but hey, at least we got some lava. But yeah, unfortunately, after the visual splendor of the last realm, this one just can't help but feel like a little bit of a step down. It certainly feels repetitive in the visuals, and it's also kind of repetitive when it comes to its core combat encounters. If there was one standout moment that I can recall from this map, it would probably be traversing this particular lava pit, which requires you to flick a switch and then make a quick dash across the platform before it raises back up and squishes you against the ceiling. After that, it's a whole lot more grunts and jamblers and grunts, and oh hey, is that a fiend? Wow, variety. Part 2 at least doesn't waste any time getting down to business, introducing you to a Vor relatively quickly, and swiftly followed by, yep, that's a shambler. I think one of the most annoying things I found about this initial section is that it's got these little alcoves to the sides of this corridor that give you the false impression that you might be able to duck into them to take cover from things such as shambler lightning or Vor projectiles or what have you, but it just doesn't work that way, and it's endlessly aggravating. On the flip side, however, I did quite enjoy this little lift puzzle that requires you to flick this switch and time it just so you can jump the gap before it raises back up again. And that moves us swiftly on to the next section of the map where, oh my god, another shambler, I swear to god. So anyway, this place is teeming with Death Knights and Vors and Fiends, and oh god, it just never fucking ends. It's just a dungeon of bullshit, and I just want it to fucking end. There's this room full of Vors, and thank god there's this little alternate route you can take and just avoid them entirely. But if you thought I was losing my rag with this part of the fucking map, oh boy, you ain't seen shit. It's not often that a map conveys outright hatred in me. And it's got to be for good reason. Sometimes it's just through virtue of being complete shit, and sometimes it's by virtue of knowingly, willingly, and in this particular case, just expertly pissing me off. And I think a great microcosm of that would be this particular sequence of traps and encounters, because not only do you have to make sure you dodge those crushers, but you also have to make sure you've got a strategy for dealing with this pair of shamblers, which just instantly apply pressure on you, make you panic, and of course force you into a mistake. I am quite frankly awestruck by the degree of rage this inspired within me. It's a masterful degree of button pushing, and one that continues way beyond this sequence. This entire last section, it is just daring you to give in to the red mist, just constantly putting you on the back foot and just presenting you with these relentlessly sadistic scenarios. Now, while the opposite side of this section doesn't feature quite as many shamblers, it is just as annoying with its own particular setup of traps and enemy placements. Much like before, it is just all pressure all the time and is just expertly designed to bait you into making dumb mistakes. You know, it just makes me think, why couldn't this have been more evenly distributed across the entirety of these maps? At least then it would make up a bit more in personality over the just relentless blandness of the first part of this realm and the first half of this particular map. Because this stuff, as aggravating as it is interesting, is memorable. But cumulatively, in this compressed space of time and geography, it makes me want to bust a friggin' blood vessel. And then there's this room. This one nearly did it for me. This one nearly made me tap out, but if anything, I am stubborn. I wasn't in the best position health-wise, and it certainly wasn't getting any better thanks to the goddamn Vor projectiles. But the aim here is to jump across these moving platforms, evict the Vors from their place, and then ultimately snag the rune at the back end of the room. I'll be honest, it took me quite a long time. I just kept throwing myself at it over and over and over, and all I could think the entire time was bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. But as they say, where there's a will, there's a way. I made it to the final platform with my just absolutely dismal health, not to mention my absolutely dismal amount of explosive ammo remaining either, and found that I now had to contend with a bunch of enforcers with the pew-pew laser guns. And all I have to say on that front is Eventually, however, I did discover that I missed a secret where I could bag myself some extra armor, and that turned out to be my golden ticket, allowing me to conserve just enough health. Just enough to squeeze by, but oh my god, the run between picking up the rune and the exit teleporter, oh, never again. Never again. So yeah, I'm sure you'll agree, definitely not a realm best played first. Or in my extremely biased opinion, ever. Realm of the Cultists. This one has a pretty nice vista to present to you right off the bat. This church suspended atop ominous rusty pipes, and it's about as full of knights as you'd expect. Oodles of them. And let's face it, the problem only multiplies as you push on further. Knights supplemented with zombies, scrags, and of course, ogres. One aspect of this that completely took me by surprise, however, was the culmination of this battle here. I fully expected the progression of the level to take me out of some unlocked side door. Instead, the floor crumbles beneath, allowing you to access deeper, darker depths. And really, this first map is all about the descent, just wondering how far down exactly it's going to take you, and more importantly, what you're going to find at the bottom. On the way, however, you're going to be doing a fair amount of blasting, and in terms of memorable encounters, why does it have to be Vors? Why is it always Vors? Well, hey, at least I got a rocket launcher for the trouble. Could be worse, and to its credit, it does resist the urge for the entirety of this first map to insert any shambler during the runtime whatsoever. All in all, though, when it comes to progression, it's a pretty straightforward map, taking you ever deeper until you reach this chamber, pitting you against a pretty chunky fight featuring multiple ogres, scrags, death knights, and then allowing you to plunge on through the portal to the next part of this realm. And I confess, I didn't quite understand what was going on here for a good long while. And the point where I figured out what was going on was where I started complaining about getting snagged on the geometry of the level. I was wondering why all of these pipes and these jutting bits of wood were on the floor. It's just serving to get in the way. Why would you design anything like this? And it was about that point that the light bulb finally went off, and I realized that this is just the preceding level inverted. And I was now ascending back to the church. It was one of those revelations that caused me to do a straight-up mental 180, going from abject annoyance to, oh yeah, that's actually pretty neat. Mercifully, it's not a one-to-one ascent. You're not retracing the exact same route. A little extra variety is peppered in thanks to this precarious bit of pipe-based platforming, and one thing that always just makes my mind reel is the knowledge that if you fall, you're falling into the sky. It's just wonderfully freaky. In any case, the upper church, or is it the lower church? I don't know, my brain's having trouble parsing the reality here, is just delectably bathed in a blood-red sky, and further battling will eventually see you crashing through multiple layers of the ceiling to what I imagine is the atrium where your final battle of the map awaits. It's just overall wonderfully constructed stuff, an entire realm structured around setup and payoff. It's not doing anything particularly complex, it's just that it's delivering on a high concept idea extremely well. But there you go, Realm of the Cultists. Short, sweet, quite a lot of fun. Things take a decidedly more cosmic turn here in Realm of the Astrologers. The skybox for some reason reminding me of a medieval somewhat. Gonna have to replay that sometime. In any case, the opening section here has you crossing this chasm of floating rocks, and you may think, oh boy, great, instant death if you fall off any of these, right? No, there's actually quite a nice concession made here where any drop from these ledges will simply teleport you back to the starting ledge. So as long as you're not too much of an idiot like me, you shouldn't have too much trouble getting through this relatively pain-free. Opposite side of the chasm will take you through some tiered ruins that offer some rather satisfying opportunity for movement and combat, whereas the interior will see you pushing further into what feels like will be some ethereal tomb, but after dispatching a Vor, you'll find that a trap switch will drop you unceremoniously through a teleport, landing you squarely in what appears to be a tech-based jail cell, which I freely admit I was not expecting. That said, this eventually grants the opportunity to figure out a bit of what's going on in this particular realm. It seems that those pesky Slipgate scientists have launched an expedition into wherever the heck this is, and have been collecting creatures, as you can see from the inhabitants of various other jail cells. That said, your mere presence here means that chaos is very shortly about to unfurl, and boy does it ever. I mean, they already seem to have trouble, what with all of the creatures crawling around this place, but once you flick a few requisite security switches, oh yeah, hell absolutely breaks loose. I mean, how else would you define a room full of shamblers and fiends? In any case, surviving this ordeal leads on to a highly fun escape sequence as the facility begins to just explode around you, bits of ceiling falling down on enemies as you pass, and then ultimately forcing you through the last remaining Slipgate exit. But lest I remind you, this is only part 1. Part 2 in that regard is a little jarring at first because it ditches the cosmic void aesthetic of the preceding map in exchange for something a little bit more regular, a little bit more, let's say, conventionally planet-side. Not to imply that it's in any way less interesting as a result, it's just that the connective tissue between the two parts is a little thin. Regardless, what's available at the start here is just really cool looking stuff. As I've said before, I'm a fan of the whole crumbling, ruined, toppled building style. It may not be as elaborately implemented here as it was in the realm of the Blacksmiths, but it's still fun to play through all the same. Eventually you'll fight your way up through this valley, landing yourself at the entrance to a dig site. Taking out a few ogres and cleaning up a pile of scrags will eventually grant you access to the facility proper, and no, sadly, you cannot commandeer this truck and use it to drive over everything in the loading bay.
Shame.
As for the interior, there's a fair degree of facility here for you to be worming your way through. You'll be taking a tour through not just the loading area, but also through the barracks, where you'll discover that infrastructure ain't holding up all that well versus lava, and once you push through that to the cafeteria, you'll make the horrifying realization that ogres may also be responsible for catering. All of this serves to unlock the back portion of this facility, whereupon you'll be able to take down a shambler and a few grunts, make that multiple shamblers, and then figure out what exactly they've been putting so much effort into excavating. It's a hell tomb, what a surprise, full of monsters and death. Your first order of business, of course, is stepping through this teleporter in order to hit 2-time switches, whereupon you'll be rewarded with what else but a Vor on a plinth. Wait, no, it's 2. 2 Vors on a plinth. In all fairness though, I really enjoy this latter section of the map. Really dials up the intensity. This area full of fireball traps constantly keeps you on your toes and goads you with the possibility of something worthwhile, provided you can find all of the shoot switches. Entirely optional, but you can't help but wonder, is it worth the effort? And truth be told, can't say no to a lightning gun. Doubly so when you consider the next area is just absolutely chock full of enemies that you'd rather dispatch ASAP. Chiefly ogres, just so much nade spam. The ascent will see you beset by even more goddamn ogres, the occasional Vor surprise, and a hefty helping of knights, not to mention shamblers. Where would we be without end-of-level shamblers? Oh, and a room full of spawn, because fuck you. After that, though, you're pretty much home free. That is, unless you fancy finding out where this lift goes, which, as it happens, knits this entire level rather neatly together, returning you to that starting area, and I guess allowing you to spend a bit of time hunting down some secrets you may have missed. Feel like I had more fun with the second map than the first, but still, as an overall package, pretty damn enjoyable. And with that, the final rune is acquired, opening the way to the final challenge of Dimension of the Machine. If you'd rather not know what it is, then now's the time to skip out on this particular section. This is your official spoiler warning. Got it? Good. Let's get into it. So, for the sake of reference, at the end of Dimension of the Doomed, you face off against Chthon. And considering it's probably the one thing resembling a boss fight during the entirety of Quake, as boss fights go, it actually kinda sucks. You don't ever directly engage with the boss, you merely run around the arena, hitting switches, lowering pylons, and then shocking Chthon himself. Repeat 3 times in a row, job's a good 'un. Not the most satisfying boss fight by any measure of the words, and clearly someone at Machine Games thought they could do a lot better. Enter Dimension of the Machines version of the Chthon boss fight. Oh boy, it's a doozy. In terms of improvements, it certainly puts a heck of a lot more agency in the hands of the player. Rather than flicking a few switches in order to deal damage to Chthon, you now have to damage him specifically using the Thunderbolt. You may have also noticed that he has friends now. Yep, it's not just a case of shoot it till it dies, it's also a case of deal with all these other sons of bitches while also dodging explosive projectiles. You'll also note that you never have quite enough lightning ammo to deal a critical blow to Chthon either. You've constantly got to patrol around this arena in order to hoover up the requisite amount, and then once that's done, you'll also find that the only source of lightning ammo is now produced from a dispenser at the back of the arena, meaning that you've really got to plan your movement around here, you've really got to keep your eyes open, and yes, it is demonstrably a heck of a lot more challenging. Successive knockdowns will also open up various aspects of the arena. The second big knockdown will open up a corridor, releasing a bunch of shamblers into the mix, and will ultimately lead you round to collecting the silver key, which triggers the next phase of the Chthon battle. Something well worth checking as well is around the back of these boxes, which will lead you neatly to a quad damage. That's going to come extremely in handy. Oh, and super sneaky pro tip, you can actually delay the next phase of this battle as long as you like, provided you don't pick up the silver key. You can take as much time as you want to do something like, I don't know, hang around the lightning gun dispenser and pick up all the ammo you need. In any case, taking Chthon down for the 3rd time will open up the route to the gold key. This one's a little bit more Vor and Death Knight flavored, but nothing you should have too much trouble with, and once again you can employ the exact same tactic, holding off on hoovering up the gold key, and instead dropping back down to that lightning dispenser so you can hoover up all the ammo you need. Sure as shit beats having to dodge explosive projectiles the entire way. From what I can tell though, it's probably not a great idea to try and shoot him from this top ledge, because I'm not actually sure the lightning reaches that far. Instead, you'll probably want to have to position yourself a little lower just to make sure you're getting the most bang for your lightning buck. And after that, a few well-placed streams of lightning should finally put him down for good. All that's left is to walk through the exit, and there you go. Dimension of the Machine finished. What, no gore explosion? 0 out of 10! Also, yes, I know I didn't run through the secret level, but I'm hoping that's something you guys can discover for yourselves. All in all, I'd say Dimension of the Machine is a more than worthy addition to the pantheon of Quake expansions, certainly leveraging a lot of really neat stuff with regards to more recent bells and whistles and the capabilities of this remaster, and damn, some of these maps just look absolutely gorgeous. Sure, I prefer some of them a heck of a lot more than others, but as an overall package, I'd say this is well worth your time. But yeah, if any of you out there have yet to experience Quake for yourself, then seriously, what are you waiting for? It's probably in the most comprehensive form that it'll ever be right now. Features all of the expansions, all of these additional bells and whistles, and if you want to tinker around with the just absolute wealth of mods available, the original version is still available to you, as I mentioned near the top of this video. But yeah, here's to 25 years of Quake, and here's to 25 years more. Who knows what crazy shit the Quake community will cook up in the meantime, but until then, I certainly hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.